Well, good morning again. I want to talk to you today about the steadfastness of the Lord, how sure He is. My wife showed me a one-liner this morning of someone that came on Facebook or something and said, "The word of the Lord is the judge." And I had to deal with that just a minute. And I said, you know what? That's a great truth. The word of the Lord is the judge. Well, in Psalms chapter 119, that long chapter, verse 160 said, "O Lord, thy word is true from the beginning, and thy righteous judgments endureth forever." I'm talking about that, about God, His character, His nature. Romans chapter 11, verse 12 said, "The gift and the callings of God are without repentance." This tells me that God doesn't change His mind. He doesn't give us gifts and take them back. He doesn't call us and change His mind. Sometimes we don't cooperate with Him as we should. Sometimes things don't work out just like they were intended to, but it's not His fault. He is faithful. God is faithful. He's all wise. He knew what He was doing. Even myself, I am amazed at the fact that God would have ever, when I could not even look anybody in the face and even tell you my name, I was so timid and so backward. And I'm amazed at the fact that I even came forward enough to even do anything in this life. But maybe God had a place for me after all. But the Bible says, "Every good gift cometh down from the Father of lights, in whom there is no variations, nor shadow of turning." Oh my. When I think about that, I think about the steadfastness of Abraham. The Bible said Abraham staggered not at the promise of God. What was fully persuaded that what God had promised, he is able to perform it. When you begin to speak like that, and you begin to let the words of Abraham affect your life, it builds your faith and gives you stability in the know that God is an all right God. He is going to see us through to the very end. There's no variableness in Him. There's no variation. There's no shadow of turn. When I think about that, I really had a flashback. If anyone might be listening to me today that would have known me in Western Oklahoma, in my later years there, our church was attracted to an older saint of a Bible carrying, a Bible thumping woman, a lady that had prayer meetings in her home and Bible studies, and she reached out to young people. Though at her elder age, she had a youthful heart, and she would invite those young people in her home and have Bible studies. One morning, right in the morning, Sunday morning service, she said, "Pastor, I've got to report a miracle." She said, "We had a miracle last night at our Bible study and our prayer meeting." She said some of those young men from the air base said they got saved, they got delivered. She said, "Pastor, above a shadow of a doubt." She didn't say shadow, she said shattered. Her name was Lou Watts. And I mean, when the Spirit of the Lord upon her, sometimes we question actions of people that take their liberty in the freedom of the Spirit. But Jesus stood up that day in Luke chapter 4, verse 18, 19. He said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because He hath anointed me. Well, you can't do that yourself. You don't supposed to stand up and say, the Lord is upon me and all that. But it'll manifest. When Lou Watts stood up and said what she said, it was a witness that the Spirit of the Lord is upon her, and she had been anointed to speak deliverance to those things that were entrapping young people, and she saw them delivered, and the effects of her prayer meeting was absolutely effective in that day. And so that verse, "in whom there's no variations and no shadow of turning," we had an evangelist one time. I think he's originally from Haiti, and he had a different speech effect, and one of the deacons of our church loaned him a nice little car, a beautiful car that he didn't use much. And so the evangelist had to come from the motel room to the church. And so rather than pick him up and bring him every time and to meet his schedule and to give him more freedom and liberty, he accepted that car to drive back and forth from that place. And so after the meeting, maybe a week or whatever it was, at least a week, I'm sure, that he turned the car back to its rightful owner. And the guy asked him, said, "Well, brother, how did it do?" He said, "Well," he said, "it had a measure of heat." He didn't say it didn't have very much, but he said it had a measure. That was kind of like a shadow of something, and there's not even a shadow of turning with God or him changing his mind or taking back a gift that he has given any one of us. So let that be bygone, if you will, and let me continue on with my scriptures. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15:58, Apostle Paul was talking, and somebody just picked up to say, knowing Jesus, since you know Jesus, if you know Jesus, the connotation of the scriptures was actually leading up to where you actually say, so since you know Jesus, the verse says this, therefore, my beloved brethren, be ye steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for as much as you know that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. What assurance we could have from the word when the great apostle Paul would tell all of us weaklings or struggling converts or anyone that might be doubtful. You know, even Jesus met a man that said, I've got some doubt in my mind. Jesus said, if you can believe, and he said, yeah, I believe, but I've got doubt. And so sometimes we do, but Apostle Paul was trying to eradicate that doubt in our lives. Galatians chapter 6, verse 9 said, and let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season you will reap if you faint not. In other words, I know that word endurance strikes a bitter note sometimes, a bittersweet at least for some of us. But the word endurance means that it's something different about the situation. So he said, be not weary in well-doing, for in due season you will reap. In other words, quitting time and payday that I say once in a while, it will absolutely come for all of us, but it will, if you faint not. So, and Jesus went on to say, he that endureth to the end, the same shall be saved. Well, there's that word again, endurance. Well, I tell you what, the best Oklahoma vernacular, redneck definition I've got for endurance is that's when you know that you're doing the difference. That's when you know you're doing the difference. I want to give you a little true story about this, if you don't mind. Back in my younger days, in the late 70s, maybe the early 80s, probably late 70s, we had finished our buildings and we'd done a lot of work ourselves. And my banker said, well, you're slim as a racehorse and now you're putting on all that weight. Well, I didn't think much about it myself, but we were celebrating a lot and feeling good about what we'd done. And we was treating each other to big meals, and we was seeing where we could go eat again on Friday night and Sunday after church. And so one day we went to the Friendship Inn, and they had a buffet. You just pitched to your wind. And Brother Colonel Orr said, well, I'm gonna just eat cinnamon rolls. I'll just pay the full price, and all I want. They only had cinnamon rolls on Sunday. So he said, I'm just going to fill up on cinnamon rolls. Well, he was a bad influence on me, and so I ate pretty healthy too. And right there at that table that day, I had a problem, and I thought I was having heart pains. And I had some kind of a noticeable pain, and the men picked me up right then and took me to the emergency room. And they called my doctor, and he came, and he said, I want to see you tomorrow. It was a false alarm. He checked me out, and he said, no, but I want to see you tomorrow. He said, you've just got a severe case of indigestion. Is all you've got today. But I'm going to put you on a diet and a program that fix you up. So the next day, I got there, and sure enough, He about as big as I was. But he said, preacher, you have to start jogging. Well, jogging was a fad back in those days. Everybody was jogging. And I said, I can't jog. He said, oh, yes, you can. He said, you go out there on that road, and he said, you walk real fast between one utility pole to the next. Then from that pole, you jog to the next one, and you walk, then you jog, and you walk and you jog, and finally, you'll begin to jog more. And he was right. Finally, after a while, it was hot summertime, and it was okay, but by the time winter came, I was up to 3 miles a day, and I was jogging. And so I was actually jogging. Now, sometime I was chug-lugging, but I was still in the motion. And sure enough, I had an experience that day that really changed my life, and I'll probably tell you about it later. But I thought that you could jog long enough that it wouldn't hurt anymore. So I was so deceived about that, it never did quit hurting. So I realized I was enduring something. Well, I thought you can't get over it. So what changed my life that day, that a famous runner could run by and said, preacher, I'm hurting too. And so it changed my life that day, because I realized it never gave up. But during those times of jogging, that adrenaline would run through my mind and oxygen would get to my brain. And I tell you what, if I can say today that I felt so good about my preaching during that time, that I was preaching above my pay grade. And I was thinking things through for young families that had teenagers that was having problems, that I could bring back them. I wasn't a counselor, but I could help them think it through. And I offered them some things of wisdom that actually worked. I'm here to tell you, every time it worked, because I was receiving that adrenaline that was flowing, and it was something good. In fact, I became addicted to it. I was so addicted to my morning of running every morning. Finally, I got up to 7 miles a day, that I could run 8-minute miles. I could do 7 miles in 56 minutes, less than an hour. And so I was doing an 8-minute mile. Now, if the fastest feet in captivity can only do it in 4 minutes, if you can do it in double time, you're doing okay. So that's where I was. So I went on to do 7 miles, but it never quit hurting. I came on to Tulsa, and I saw the big run of the marathon and all the big run they had. So one of the men in my church was in that run. So my wife and I went down to watch him run, and here come Riley Carpenter, and I bounced off I was still jogging at that time here in the Tulsa area, and so I was doing the 5K, and it's doing 10 and 15, but I was doing the 5K, and so I bounced off the curb and jogged along with Riley for about 100 or so yards, and then the next morning I went to my pulpit with my jogging suit on, and I preached the famous message, I'm hurting too. I'll share that in the devotion with you before long, but anyway, what I come to say was this. You know, it hurt, but there's advantage to it. One day I was trying to shame myself. I told myself, it's silly. You're out here jogging, it's not worth it. Then I happened to think, you know what? If it didn't hurt, there wouldn't be room to run out here. But because it hurts, there's plenty of room. And when I come to that, realize that because it hurts, Jesus said there's a straight gate and a narrow way, and few be there that find it. But he said there's a broad way and an easy gate, a big gate, and many go therein. So I'm preaching to myself today, for you, if you don't mind, that it was worth it when I realized that the reason that I had plenty of room to run, because it did hurt. And that's the reason very few people was out there joining me that time of morning, because the difference is in the difference. And I want to share that with you one day in a devotion. You see, excuse me, those days are past now. And I wrote a book, and I put a chapter in that book, I'm hurting too. And I sent a letter to the man that was running marathons in Chicago and New York and was a great inspiration to our city. And I wrote and told him that I had mentioned him in my book and the fact that what he said that day, preacher, I'm hurting too. And he told me that day, he said, no, those days are over for me. I can't even run across the street to get my mail. He said, all those days. Since that time, he has passed away. But he inspired me so greatly that day when my goal was to quit hurting. But he said, no, you don't quit hurting. That there's an advantage to it. And there really was, and there is. And so if you feel like that you're enduring the cross, if you are, it's something a little uncomfortable to you, well, I want to encourage you that the difference is in the difference. I can't explain it to you, but I can show you in actual things that I'll be sharing with you someday, that the difference is really in the difference. And you can feel that in your heart. When Lou Watts would ask for permission to share a miracle that would actually bring down the fire in our service, actually would absolutely struck fire. And the Spirit of the Lord moved because it was contagious. And when you begin to think about the scriptures that I have spoke to you about today, they're contagious. They will affect your life. That's the virus I want. That's the one I want that sets me on fire and wakes up the spirit in my heart and my life and lets me know that the endurance is worth it. God bless you. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.